5 chilling and famous last statements from death row inmates. Number 1. Imagine sitting in a death chamber, strapped down, knowing your final breath is only seconds away. Most people, when asked to speak their last words, plead for forgiveness, express regret, or call out to loved ones. But when Eileen Wuornos, America's most infamous female serial killer, faced her execution in 2002, her words were nothing short of chilling. She stared at the witnesses, her voice calm, almost prophetic, and declared,
"I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back."
It wasn't a plea. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. To understand the weight of those words, you have to know Eileen. She lived a life of abandonment, abuse, and rage, surviving on the fringes of society. She claimed she killed in self-defense against men who tried to harm her. But juries and investigators saw something far darker: 7 bodies, 7 executions carried out with cold precision. Her last statement reveals the psychology of a woman who refused to die quietly. Instead of fading into obscurity, she painted herself as larger than life, aligning with religious prophecy, alien imagery, and cinematic spectacle. It was delusion. It was defiance. It was a final act of control. And for those who heard it, the question lingered long after the lethal injection took hold. Was Eileen Wuornos mad, or was she trying to haunt the world one last time? Number 2. When the execution chamber doors closed on John Wayne Gacy, there was no remorse in his eyes. This was a man who had lived a double life, the friendly neighborhood clown who entertained children and the predator who lured 33 young men and boys to their deaths, burying most of them beneath a suburban home. On March 10th, 1994, as he faced lethal injection, many wondered, would this man finally acknowledge his monstrous crimes? Would he beg forgiveness? Would he confess to what he had long denied? But when given the chance to speak his last words, John Wayne Gacy sneered and spat out just 3.
"Kiss my ass."
Cold, defiant, void of humanity. In that moment, Gacy revealed exactly who he was: a man who thrived on control, even in death. Psychologists point out that killers like Gacy rarely admit guilt. To them, admitting wrongdoing means surrendering power. Instead, his words were meant to wound the families watching, to deny them the closure they desperately craved. It was a final mask of John Wayne Gacy, not the painted clown, not the family man, but the unrepentant killer who chose mockery over remorse. And perhaps that's what chills us most. His last words weren't just an insult, they were a window into a man who never saw his victims as human, a man who carried arrogance and cruelty straight into his grave. Number 3. Death row has a way of breaking people. For some, the final hours are spent in prayer, trembling, begging for mercy. But for James French, his last moments were not marked by fear, but by a twisted sense of humor. French was already serving a life sentence in Oklahoma for murder. But in 1966, restless and desperate, he killed his own cellmate. Why? Because he wanted the state to execute him. He wasn't running from death, he was chasing it. That decision alone tells you something about his psychology. French didn't see life as a gift. To him, prison was a cage with no escape, and execution was freedom. But he wanted more than death, he wanted to be remembered. As he was strapped into the electric chair, the room grew silent. The warden gave him the chance to speak his last words. And with a grin, French delivered a line that still echoes through history.
"How's this for your headline? French fries."
Dark humor, morbid with whatever you call it. It was his final act of control. Instead of letting the state define his ending, he wrote his own punchline. Psychologists argue that this joke wasn't just comedy, it was defiance. French turned his death into a performance, mocking the very system that killed him. His fearlessness unsettled everyone in that room. And when the switch was thrown, silence returned. Only the memory of his words remained. Proof that sometimes the most chilling killers don't scream. They laugh. Number 4. In 1977, America watched history unfold inside a small prison in Utah. For nearly a decade, executions had been halted in the United States. But when the death penalty was reinstated, the very first man to face it was Gary Gilmore. Gilmore wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a drifter with a violent streak, convicted of 2 brutal murders. Yet what set him apart wasn't the crimes. It was what came after. When sentenced to death, Gilmore didn't fight it. He didn't appeal, didn't plead. Instead, he demanded that the state carry out the execution. In his own words, "It's been sanctioned by the courts and I accept that." On January 17, 1977, a firing squad awaited him. The room was tense. Reporters, prison officials, and witnesses sat in silence, knowing they were watching a moment that would define American history. Gilmore was asked for his final words. No long speech, no tears, just 2 simple sentences that cut like a blade. Let's do it. It wasn't just defiance, it was a challenge, a chilling acceptance of fate. Psychologists say those words reveal a man who craved control. By embracing death so calmly, Gilmore denied the state the satisfaction of breaking him. That line, brief and brutal, became more famous than Gilmore himself. Some even claim it later inspired one of the world's most iconic slogans, "Just do it." But behind the legend remains a chilling truth. Gilmore didn't fear death. He welcomed it. Number 5. In 1930s Germany, Curtin terrorized a city with a string of assaults and murders, many committed with shocking brutality. He confessed that the sound of blood rushing from his victims gave him sexual gratification. The newspapers called him a monster, a predator, a vampire. And when he was finally captured, the world wanted to know, what goes on inside a mind like his? The answer came on July 2nd, 1931, as Curtin prepared to face the guillotine. Witnesses waited for a statement, perhaps an apology, or at least a sign of fear. Instead, Curtin leaned toward his executioner and asked,
"Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures."
It was chilling, grotesque, and revealing. Psychologists later noted that his obsession with blood was not just fetishistic, it was a core of his identity. Even in death, Curtin longed for the ecstasy of violence. His last words weren't for redemption. They were a window into the abyss, a final reminder that for some killers, death isn't an ending that is an extension of their darkest desires. And as the blade fell, silence followed. But his words still echo, nearly a century later, like a whisper from the edge of madness.